Often in life, we stop to reflect on what life is like, its fairness and unfairness. Since childhood, we've been taught to be kind to others, to give without expecting anything in return, habits that are good from the perspective of values and even religious concepts. However, many of us get into trouble for helping. Dom Aurelio fell in love with a woman 6 years older than him and since then dedicated himself to working in a diner. He gave a good life to his wife, who cared for him like a king and was always there to support him in the worst moments of his life. In the good and bad times, as the priest who married them had said, life couldn't be better than being with that powerful woman who sustained him for 35 years, but couldn't give him children. He had a heart willing to love her until the end of his days. Whatever happened, happened. He couldn't give her children and now faced loneliness at 65, succumbing to an illness that quickly deteriorated his life. Aurelio knew and felt in his heart that he would soon lose her. So, one morning, holding her hand after helping her drink chamomile tea, she lay down and closed her eyes, but not before declaring her love and gratitude for his efforts to take care of her in her last moments of life. Aurelio thought he would rest after that, as he did every day, but Ilaria, his wife, his companion, never woke up again. He worked hard and accumulated some wealth, and when he should have started traveling the world, she fell ill. He was extremely regretful. Now he had to start traveling with every paycheck he received. His restaurants ran themselves, and he could take them on the road. He cursed as he caressed inside the coffin. It seemed like a blink of an eye, just as the priest had mentioned at the funeral. The dead in Christ will rise. He had recounted a promise that Christ revealed to John on the islands of Patmos, but to him at the time, it made no sense. It had been a blink of an eye being alive and full of love with her, and the next day there was no color on her lips, no color on her face. Life had fled from her. He felt like he hadn't lived enough. Upon arriving after burying her with melancholy, he still opened the door and there was mail. It was his account statements, payment receipts, among them a dear letter for Ilaria. The hostel had expedited and sent you the report of your contribution to our institution. Sincerely, Sister Marcella. He knew what it was about. About 7 years ago, he had argued with her because he found out she was sending resources to that institution without consulting him. They had a fight that lasted all day while he brushed his teeth. She said he was an old man, but he would rot with money. Strong words compared to what she was always used to saying to him. I work and send my savings to charity. We have enough, but God knows the need that will arise. All those orphaned and abandoned children. That day, he remembers having thought all night that he already had the savings, already had money in the account, enough to start traveling, but he thought he would wait a few more years for it to be enough. At the end of that period, they would start worshiping a certain amount of money for the Blue Angels orphanage, which his wife had supported for so long. But she not only gave money, but also with her presence, her time in the various activities of the institution. Many of the little ones approached the window before turning off the lights. A subtle feeling brought to mind the times his wife went out at night to say goodbye to the children while he finished the workday. He had found out one night when she hadn't arrived before him. She said she had been at the orphanage helping to put to sleep children who had lost their parents in a shipwreck and couldn't sleep well. He, without thinking about it, claimed it was too late and she hadn't communicated anything. He was upset. If I go out, but you really need to know that I'm helping those children carry their burdens. He thought Ilaria had no more responsibility than the house and taking care of him. That had been selfish of him, she thought. Since he didn't want to involve her in the business, he treated her as he had promised when they got married, like a princess. He stood for a few minutes in front of the orphanage that his wife had donated, not only with money, but also with her time, bringing back memories with nostalgia, a desolation so strong that it was capable of mobilizing him there, pulling tears that he no longer had. How I wished I could go back in time and correct those moments, he thought. Moments that were very valuable and that he wasted. After almost half an hour standing in front of the orphanage house, he snapped out of it and resumed walking towards home. Walking always made him feel good to come home tired and not have the slightest energy to think about the loneliness that now embraced him and felt so cold. An idea occurred to him a few days later as he walked to work. 20 minutes of walking made him reflect and try to feel good in some way. He didn't feel like spending his money and taking a trip. There was no motivation for that. That really wasn't his plan, and he didn't find it appealing now that he was alone. He wandered with ideas, but among them, one prevailed. He would go to the orphanage as a volunteer to help with anything. Mr. Aurelio. Greeted with enthusiasm, one of the responsible nuns asked, "What brings you here?" He was surprised they recognized him. "How do you know me?" "Well, your wife told us a lot about you. Your donations, they really helped us a lot." "How can we help you, Mr. Aurelio?" "Well, I wanted to volunteer to help, whatever the children needed. I have some time, right?" "I understand. Well, now we have an emergency for volunteers, but on the shift, the night from 7 to 9 to help with dinner and some things. You know, the children always require a lot of work." "Yes, I understand. I'll start tomorrow," Aurelio replied enthusiastically. "Welcome to the Blue Angels family." That day, his heart raced, and he didn't want to stay awake anymore. The next day, he left the restaurant at 6:30, punctually. Upon entering the main hall, he witnessed one of the stories that really moved him. Quickly, in front of him, were two women who said they had found a boy in the dump near the train tracks. Aurelio couldn't help but hear this story and was quickly led to reflection. Then, a boy about 6 years old, whose parents were alcoholics and the government had removed his stability because they had been very irresponsible with him. Now, the little boy waited his turn to be enrolled and then joined the 139 children who were already there. Being at the reception for just 10 minutes was enough to move him. Life there was very sad, yet the smiles of the sisters upon receiving him conveyed a kind of relief and peace, the peace he had long sought and now felt. He was there to extinguish the inner demons that consumed him, for treating his wife poorly and arrogantly, to redeem himself through actions that would help him know that his beloved Ilaria would be happy to help and contribute to a good cause. One of the sisters approached him and told him to carry the trays. Dinner was ready: bread, herbal tea, and a piece of ham. They had dinner that day, and it was all perfect. They thanked God and started eating. The silence was filled with the clatter of utensils and plates, which, although plastic, reminded that they were children, and that was the reason. If they were porcelain, there wouldn't be more plates like this. While waiting for the sisters to prepare everyone for bed, he carried the new sheets that a businessman had donated a month earlier. Upon reaching the main hall, he found many on the floor, on mattresses. The prayer was made. Then each child turned off the light in a part of the immense room and prepared to lie down in their bed, each one to sleep. As he walked down the hallway with Sister Maria, the shift supervisor, he couldn't help but ask why they slept on the floor, to which she replied that it was the only way. The children took turns. One day some slept on the floor and another in the cabins. This was the arrangement after the capacity of the orphanage ended. "We have no more space. There are no beds," Sister Maria replied sadly. Aurelio lowered his head upon hearing this. The next day, while washing dishes in his restaurant, he thought he could donate beds to the orphanage, so he could fulfill his beloved Ilaria's wish to contribute something to the orphanage. That same day, the new cabins arrived. Many of the children cried when they saw they wouldn't sleep on the floor anymore. The euphoric gratitude of that night with Aurelio, when he arrived, couldn't be avoided. Although he felt that for them it was just a detail, it really meant progress. There were many shortcomings. Aurelio wanted to contribute to make the place better than he found it. Although it seemed unbelievable, his bad feelings about his wife had disappeared. Instead, now he had thoughts to continue helping. One night, while they were having dinner, the front door suddenly opened. Something had happened at the reception. Aurelio, who although he was aging, had already decided to go to support and thus help the sisters, but upon arriving, he discovered that it was a mother begging for help. "I have little time to live, sisters, my daughters have no one to stay with. I'm Australian and here in the UK I have no one. Please help me. I don't have much time. Do something." "I understand you, but look, we have no more space and there are 3 girls. I recommend you go to the embassy and notify your relatives." Her words were touching, but Aurelio couldn't intercede. He didn't know what was good to say in these occasions. However, he was moved by compassion to tell the Mother Superior that he could accommodate a few more rooms. The mother felt relieved, meeting the woman who would come with her daughters the next day. However, the woman didn't show up the next morning and in the following days either. What could have happened? They wondered. Aurelio requested information to be able to investigate the matter. That day, he missed work. He walked to the house next to an abandoned mill. They noticed that there used to be a large corn industry there or something like that, but now everything was in ruins. Upon arrival, a man was at the gate of the property. "Good morning, sir. I'm looking for Mrs. Merlinda. A few days ago she came asking for help and agreed to come back, but she hasn't returned to the orphanage yet." The man finished smoking the cigar he carried and replied, "Right, I understand. I'm a neighbor of the Colado farm. The little ones are there because their mother was buried. The disease that hit the poor thing was incurable, and she herself said that the girls should go to the orphanage asking for help. But no one dared to take them. They say around here the girls are cursed." Aurelio didn't understand the last word the man said. When he was a child, his father had taught him that there is no curse, but luck or something like that. Just a positive attitude and a desire to do good and God above all. In other words, I understood that the devil existed, but also God, and surely his power was unlimited. But why do they say that? Look, my dear, Merlinda's family was one of the most prosperous in the region, but the 3 girls were born, and the business failed. No one else wanted to do business with this family. The girl's father drowned in the river trying to fix a canal that gave more speed to the water mill they had. Then, her mother came here to the city to work with whatever it was. So, she found a job in the mine and, with that, she supported her daughters. But recently, a disease in her lungs just took her away. While he was telling this, 3 girls came out in front of him. Seeing them, he realized that they had really been forgotten for a long time. The mother had already done what she could. Their patched clothes and singed hair made him see their great need. "Sir, take them away. But I hope they don't cause trouble in the orphanage. There are only 3 girls. Let superstition behind," replied Aurelio. Upon arriving at the orphanage with them, the sisters then said they couldn't keep them. They would speak to the government tomorrow to see if they could make room for them in a nursing home in the same city. Aurelio had to give up work that day. He was doing something else that filled the void of his loneliness. He felt better helping those whom his beloved wife wanted to help. Then, working at the restaurant, which, by the way, was his. It was then that, with the allowance in his pocket, he bought some clothes for the girls and headed to the Blue Angels orphanage. He planned to cross the small field and reach the door, but his surprise was great when he saw the 3 girls standing in front of the house, while the same man who had told them the sad story of the girls came out. The sisters talked to him, and he was confused. They weren't supposed to come from God? How can they believe that such a thing exists? Now he understood. The sisters didn't want to be bound by any kind of curse that reached the orphanage. There are no such things as curses and bad luck. Simply for me it is God using these girls as proof of his true faith and devotion. And as we can see, you are making it look very bad, denying the permanence of these girls. Mr. Aurelio, many children fear that something will happen to them during the night. Many things have been woven around the ruin and death of the parents of these 3 girls. Aurelio didn't stay long in the church, not enduring the hypocrisy of many who beat their chests in front of a priest to end up in trouble in their lives. Disillusioned, he felt that superstitions had more strength than faith in a powerful God who can do anything. A thought surrounded him. He was alone. He had a big house with 3 spacious rooms that he himself built for visitors. But, being immigrants from Australia, the few relatives he and his wife had were far away. "I'll take them to live with me. Tell me where I should sign." So very carefully, love, affection, he carried the 3 little ones, Luisa, Camila, and Julia. They would soon receive the surname of their adoptive father, Clifford. Upon entering the huge house, the little ones were surprised. They were already 8 years old enough to know why they were being rejected. Aurelio Clifford hired a governess and a cook. With them, it would be enough to help him with the girls. He had no experience, but seeing the girls in their new dresses, he couldn't help but cry and, in his thoughts, say, "I wish you were here, Ilaria. You would see what your good husband did." They were doing very well, happy and satisfied. However, Aurelio Clifford received the balances of that year, showing the crisis in his business. He would have to close his restaurants. Apparently, the country didn't have enough to eat on the street. Due to the crisis, everyone withdrew to eat in their own homes. Food was bought in stores and was also scarce. He was living off his savings. But how long will it last, sir? Luisa was already 16 when, accidentally, she heard what was happening. But she had an idea. "Father," she said confidently, as they had lived together for more than 7 years, "we have my parents' land, and if you have any money, it wouldn't cost much to revive the land and plant. Now, the whole town is trying to buy the fields, and there is enough demand for country products. I think it would be a good idea." Aurelio Clifford really didn't have much money. He hadn't even been able to travel anymore. Instead, he stayed to take care of his daughters and give them the necessary education. At the time, he gave them everything they needed. If he were alone, the money would have lasted a while longer, but he had 3 daughters now. The idea was good, but he was too old to work the land. So, Louisa said to him, "But, father, Camille, and Julia can," she said with an innocent smile, which gave hope to the situation. They would be alone. The employees would be dismissed, but Louisa talked to them. And it is that if they are dismissed, it would also not be good for them. No one was giving work in the middle of that crisis. So, they simply focused on having food for their home and thus being able to survive. Aurelio released half of the remaining savings, and with that, they fixed the house and cleaned the mill, completely fixing it. Now, they had to plow the land, feed it to start planting corn. For 3 months they chose, as they couldn't pinpoint. They needed hands, they gave work, and not only the townspeople bought, but also the government bought to send to other cities. Aurelio Clifford was named as the savior in the city of Arimathea. He knew it wasn't him who had the idea. Corn saved the people and the country. Louisa turned the land to plant fruits and vegetables, as well as rice and other vegetables. From there, the ideas in activating their lands not only fame, but also money to get out of a crisis in which many had abandoned themselves. Aurelio Clifford and his 3 daughters entered history when neighboring countries, whose lands were not very fruitful, began to buy the crops. At 83, Aurelio still signed purchase and sale contracts, as well as land leases to plant coffee and other products. They are acts of kindness that mark a point of light in the midst of darkness. An act of kindness can truly have a multiplying effect, not only in a city, but also in the heart of those who, sometimes, due to tribulation, are hit. We must bear in mind that we are the light in the midst of someone else's darkness and curse. The 3 little women married prayed men and had families in the best conditions they could live in. Aurelio Clifford died at 93, but before that, his daughters who took him to travel to most of the world. They met their firsts and their grandchildren. He lived happily and died in peace. He welcomed death with joy, knowing that not only had he done a kindness to his wife, but he had also been built up, reaching these 3 girls who ended up doing it with him, teaching him the true purpose of living in the world. What an emotional story, my dear friends. If you understood the heart of the story, please let me know in a comment below. I will be happy to give you a heart, receive from me a distant hug, wherever you are. Subscribe, like the video, and activate the notification bell and select the all option. That way, you won't miss any of my stories. See you soon with more stories like this. A big hug and stay with God.